Alright. No camera for now, guys. And we didn't need that chess uh, article to tell us what we already knew. Um, there have been calls to eradicate transgenderism or just people in general from any public existence.
There can be no middle way in dealing with transgenderism. It is all or nothing. If transgenderism is true, if men really can become women, then it's true for everybody of all ages. If transgenderism is false, as it is, if men really can't become women, as they cannot, then it's false for everybody too. And if it's false, then we should not indulge it, especially since that indulgence requires taking away the rights and customs of so many people. If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
So, obviously, from the extermination of the Joyas, it spoke of the only way to destroy the idea would, like, it doesn't even involve destroying the bodies, but, you know, if we're being for real, guys, it really would involve destroying the bodies to first start out with. Like, what would happen if we suddenly stopped even promoting transgenderism and people had to go back in the closet is that people would just die from suicide. And that's a type of auto-cide that I think should be brought into the fray of that category. Like, it really should be a type of auto-cide that is inflicted upon them. Like, because obviously you don't need to kill the bodies, but bodies will drop once you take away from them their way to flourish, you know? Okay, that's obvious, but still. Alright, so I gotta read this article. Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire sparked alarm on Saturday with his anti-trans rhetoric during a speech at CPAC. Quote, if transgender is false and for the good of society, transgender is to be eradicated from public life entirely, the whole preposterous ideology, he said. John Neffel, a Media Matters, called it, quote, eliminationist genocidal rhetoric, end quote. Christopher Mathias of PuffPost said it was, quote, a straight-up eliminationist anti-trans tirade, end quote. Adam Very of Variety argued people to, quote, pay attention, this is genocidal. This is not hyperbole or alarmist. This rhetoric is calling for the eradication of a group of people for who they are, end quote. Quote, transgenderism is people. He's talking about eradicating people. When newspapers print scare stories about kids transitioning too early, when podcast hosts whine about girls' sports, when politicians snark about the definition of woman, this is what they're talking about, end quote. Raphael Bob Wakesberg said, quote, it would be great if non-trans people would start paying attention to this because the quiet part is getting shouted at this point. Jacqueline Moore added, quote, if only there was a word for when they want to eradicate a kind of people, a word trans people have said these people we're talking about, but people would call this hyperbolic. I guess my vocabulary just isn't good enough, end quote. So at this point in the what's going on in the world, people already know this. This is like before the eradication rhetoric. I don't think people were as heightened, but as soon as this came out, my husband was just on TikTok listening to stuff and like people talking about having to flee certain places, and all this other crazy chaos that came out of the rhetoric and the propaganda. Alright. Writer Parker Malloy said, quote, "Hey, this is really scary shit, and I wish that the assholes who keep insisting that there aren't major legislative attacks on trans people of all ages happening right now would stop lying about that. Things are getting really bad," end quote. And goes on to say, "The GOP could not be more clear about their intentions. They want to eradicate trans people. They are saying this out loud," end quote, Charlotte Claymore said. Michael Knowles has said in the past that his rhetoric isn't genocidal because he doesn't believe trans people exist, Jezebel noted, end quote. Quote, "There can't be a genocide," he said in his program last week, because that, quote, "it's not a legitimate category of being. They're laboring under a delusion, and so we need to correct that delusion," end quote. That's really dark. Mr. Knowles was far from alone in his remarks about trans people at CPAC, during which many speakers and panelists have used the issues to whip up their base. Florida's GOP Representative Matt Gaetz joked that President Joe Biden spent, quote, 4 or 5 days asking the Chinese spy balloon what pronouns it uses before he shot it down, end quote. Oh my god. Former Trump advisor Sebastian Gorga ranted about, quote, "mutilating boys and girls," end quote, and sacrificing them on the altar of transgender insanity, end quote. Outside of CPAC, former Vice President Mike Pence baselessly claimed that Iowa school nurses have to get permission from parents to provide aspirin, but can simply hand out, quote, "gender transition plans," end quote, to students without any checks, according to Heartland Signal. Right-wing activist Candace Owens said on the 2nd of March that, quote, "there is no middle ground on transgenderism," end quote, and that if you don't have the courage to say what needs to be said, we truly don't need you, end quote. Georgia Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene told CPAC attendees that she's putting forward a bill that called the Protect Children's Innocent Act that would criminalize doing, quote, "anything to do with gender-affirming care for minors." Okay, I'm surprised I could even play that video from Michael Knowles. So, after this video, honestly, I might do research on them and them as in Matt Walsh as well, unfortunately. Alright. So, Matt Walsh is pretty outspoken. He has openly said in his bio and in text that he's a fascist. Okay, so from Matt Walsh, "We were minding our own business when suddenly the trans movement came along and demanded that we totally abandon biology, common sense, and truth itself for its sake. Our war against this scourge is a defensive struggle. They started it. They wanted this fight. Now they have it." And I guess someone brought up a similarity to what Matt Walsh was saying, and if it came from Joseph Goebbels, and published in the German magazine Das Reich, that, quote, "the Jews wanted the war and now they have it." So, I guess I don't know if this is a common put-together phrase that you could say to anybody, but it is pretty on the nose based on where this is going. I don't want to deny that it's genocidal. It has to be. Alright. Unfortunately, we have to go directly for Twitter to this, or X, I guess. Yeah, wasting my time waiting for this thing to load, but it's worth it, because it was hard for me to bat out this section of the theme, because I knew a lot of it would lag. Alright. Oh, come on. I'm not even, like, away from the house. So I believe this tweet is Matt Walsh comparing trans people to cockroaches, which during the Rwandan genocide, I believe that was a common rhetorical strategy of dehumanization. Okay. The Hutsus in Rwanda on the radio regularly used the term cockroaches to describe Tutsis in the building up to the genocide there. The dehumanization is how they lower people's empathy and prime them to murder others. Oh. Oh, Matt Walsh going full genocide rhetoric and calling trans people cockroaches. Alright, so Matt Walsh says, wow, these cockroaches are really going all in with the defamation today. As the clip shows, I said no such thing. So, Ari Drennan, which I'm not going in depth with the rhetoric of this section, but it took 3 days after the mass shooting at the Club Q for the Daily Wire's Matt Walsh to blame the victims for the massacre. Of course he would. Alright. The station is considered to have preyed upon the deep animosities and prejudices of many Hutsus. The hateful rhetoric was placed alongside the sophisticated use of humor and popular Zairian music. It frequently referred to Tutsis as cockroaches. You Tutsis are cockroaches, we will kill you, end quote. Damn. That's just so terrible. Like, honestly, he couldn't have picked a different, like, slur. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. I have to go back to... Alright. So I might have to look for the quotes here, but yeah. I initially thought that I had posted the direct quotes, but it's just a bunch of scrambled image searches. Okay, so I gotta look for the Los Angeles Blade. So I'm visiting this page. Hopefully this won't directly exit me out once I'm done reading this article. So I don't know if this Daily Blade, or the Los Angeles Blade, is a right-wing news article. I guess we'll figure it out. Oh, okay, well it says extreme, so maybe that's emphasizing some empathy and signaling something against Matt Walsh. Okay, that's my guess. Alright, the Daily Wire's Matt Walsh makes extreme attacks on trans kids, seemingly violating hate speech policies on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Walsh says medical care for trans kids is molestation and rape. Oh my god. By Brianna January, Washington. During the May 22nd edition of the Daily Wire podcast, The Matt Walsh Show, host Matt Walsh compared best practice medical care for trans youth to, quote, molestation and rape, and repeatedly slandered the doctors who provide such necessary care. Walsh shared the episode to YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter despite those platforms' hate speech policies that claim to prohibit such content. In reality, best practice health care for trans youth is widely supported by medical professionals and yields long-term mental health benefits. Furthermore, young trans and gender-diverse children are not undergoing treatment or surgery until they are older. Rather, as social work professor Catherine Kuvalanka told the Washington Post, quote, the only interventions for young children is affirmation and acceptance for who they are, end quote. Moreover, research shows that affirming families and communities can be, quote, life-saving for young trans people. According to Reuters, a 2016 study in the journal LGBTQ Health found, quote, for transgender or gender non-conforming individuals, as rejection from family members increases, so does likelihood of suicide attempts or substance abuse, end quote. During a nearly 20-minute monologue on his podcast, Walsh called such necessary care, quote, mutilation, end quote, said that advocates of best practice care for trans kids are trying to undermine the legal, scientific, and philosophical case against pedophilia. What? End quote. And claimed that a, quote, child who is put on hormones and who has their body being mutilated is being sexually violated in a way that is just as depraved or damaging as molestation or rape, end quote. He also repeatedly cited anti-trans author Abigail Shriner's flawed theories on, quote, social contagion, end quote, of transgender identity in adolescence. She has also compared being trans to having anorexia and joining a cult. Damn. This is like shocking to hear and dive into again. Damn. Pretty sure I read this article or watched somebody read this article before, but I mean, I'm diving into everything now, so it's fine. Walsh also attacked doctors who serve trans youth, calling them evil. We're talking about Nazi scientist evil and PDF files. And he said affirming procedures has, quote, plastic surgeons basically acting like Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, end quote. Really, dude? Okay. The podcast episode is even titled The Evil Quacks Mutilating Our Children. Instead of supporting best practice medical care, Walsh seemingly advocated for discrediting and harmful practice of conversion therapy for trans kids, saying that, quote, the goal of therapy should be quite literally the exact opposite, end quote, of affirming a transgender identity. Walsh's podcast was shared on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, seemingly in violation of their hate speech policies. Facebook's community standards define hate speech as, quote, as a direct attack against people on the basis of who we call protected characteristics, including gender identity and expression. The platform prohibits, quote, dehumanizing speech or imagery in the form of comparisons, generalizations, or unqualified behavioral statements, end quote, including basically describing people as, quote, sexual predators or as, quote, violent and sexual criminals, end quote. Additionally, Facebook banned posts that, quote, advertise or promote, end quote, conversion therapy in 2020. Alright. Similarly, YouTube's hate speech policy states that the platform will, quote, remove content promoting violence or hatred against individuals or groups, quote, end quote, based on attributes including sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, sex, or gender. It also bans, quote, conspiracy theories saying individuals or groups are evil, corrupt, or malicious based on any of the attributes noted above, end quote. YouTube cites examples of context that violates the policy, including videos that, quote, allege the superiority of a group over those with any of the attributes noted above to justify violence, discriminate, segregation, or exclusion, end quote. Notably, the platform has removed videos in the past for comparing being trans to having a mental illness. Likewise, Twitter's hateful conduct policy states that users, quote, may not promote violence against or directly attack or threaten other people on the basis of sexual orientation, gender, or gender identity, end quote. The company also claims to be, quote, committed to combating abusive motivated by hatred, prejudice, or intolerance, particularly abuse that seeks to silence the voice of those who have been historically marginalized, end quote, including, quote, women, people of color, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual individuals, marginalized, and historically underrepresented communities, end quote. Despite these policies against hate speech targeting trans people, Walsh shared the May 24th video of his podcast on all three platforms. He shared and pinned it to his Facebook page, part of the Daily Wire's network of several anti-LGBTQ pundits with large Facebook platforms, which is often used to misinform about trans people, uploading it to YouTube, where it has earned almost 52,000 views in under 24 hours and shared and pinned it on his Twitter account. If Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter are serious about their claims to care about their LGBT users, they should not tolerate Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire's network's continued use of their platform to attack trans people and lie about them. So, the sad thing about this is, now we are deep, like 2 years later after this article was published, and Elon Musk has changed Twitter. It's a fucking far-right hellhole. Basically, the Taliban supports Twitter's free speech. It's insanity. Like, there's no way that the conclusion of this article happened at all. Like, it's very sad. Like, we failed this article's mission. Okay. Oh. So, I'm not really sure, but the Nashville shooting, we remember that, right? Well, they love using tragedy to fit their agenda, of course, and this is just another situation where they could use that. Alright, the right is using the Nashville shooting to declare war on trans people. It has been an online... Oh, sorry, car. It has been an online barrage towards basically any visible trans person online, end quote. Okay. Almost as soon as details started to emerge about the shooter in Nashville, Tennessee, who killed 6 people, pundits and politicians on the right started exploiting the tragedy to spread anti-trans hate. Though investigations into Monday's shooting at the Covenant School in Nashville are ongoing, early reports have identified the 28-year-old shooter as a transgender person. Predictably, right-wing personalities immediately started falsely blaming trans people in general for the mass shooting that killed 3 young children and 3 adults. I thought it was a little more than that. Just keeping my eyes out for somebody mad at me not knowing the current amount that was found out a long time ago. Sorry about that. Okay, quote. How much hormones like testosterone and medication for mental illness was the transgender Nashville shooter taking, end quote, Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted on Monday. Everyone can stop blaming guns now, end quote. Whoa. Transgender mass shooters are incredibly rare, as are female shooters. Only a handful of shootings are out of 100 across the country have involved a person who identifies as trans. And 98% of mass public shooters are men, according to the Violence Project, which tracks mass shootings. So I imagine it's young, under, in their teens, young male teens, because in that article that I read, I forget which video it was, Shot Up and Starved. Yes, kids had to come out and basically protect themselves and speak up for their own safety because adults weren't doing it. In that article, it was talking about how it's mostly young people that are doing the shooting of people, and it's older people who probably think of the consequences and take their own lives. And my guess is young people will either kill others and take their own life, but usually it's the former. Okay. And yet, anti-trans hate is proliferating and escalating all over Fox News, Twitter, 4chan, Telegram, and Kiwi Farms as more news trickles out of Nashville. Pundits and politicians on the right have published a stream of disinformation, including unsubstantiated claims that hormone replacement therapy, a life-saving and affirming treatment for many trans people, can increase the likelihood of someone committing gun violence. Many far-right people have started co-opting the term trans terrorism, once used to describe violence targeting trans people, to imply that trans people are the violent ones, while also pushing the erroneous Christian nationalist belief that trans people are waging a holy war. So this almost comes off like Scott Levy's pink swastika narrative, where it's the minority group that's doing the genocide and murder, and that almost I mean, that overlaps with this rhetoric of waging a holy war. That's pretty messed up. Some within the extreme right are even promising violence and stated in post on Telegram, let the roundups begin and it's, quote, time to purify, end quote. Again, an excuse, a tragedy for their agenda. This is just sick. Quote, I came to the conclusion years ago that the trans movement is the greatest evil our country faces, the Daily Wire, Matt Walsh wrote on Tuesday. I only became more and more sure of this fact with each passing day, and more determined to oppose it until my last breath, end quote. Walsh has 1.5 on Twitter, and by the time of publication, this tweet was liked more than 31,000 times and viewed 2.8 million times. Quote, I am not sure there are words for just how irresponsible and bloodthirsty the Fox News primetime coverage of the tragic Nashville shooting coverage was this evening, end quote. Tweeted Ari Drennan, LGBTQ program director with progressive media watchdog Media Matters. Quote, it has been an online barrage towards basically any visible trans person online, end quote. LGBTQ activist Alejandra Calaveras told Vice News, quote, the trolls are basically out in full force with no restraint. The mounting reactions on the far right aren't surprising. In 2023 alone, GOP lawmakers across the U.S. have introduced nearly 500 anti-trans bills, a record-breaking number. Now again, I believe it's 600 to 700 by now, guys. This is... okay. Republicans have also banned critical gender-affirming care for minors in 10 states and continue to pursue draconian anti-LGBT bills, including a bill out of Arkansas that would charge transgender adults with sex crimes if they enter a bathroom at the same time as a minor. For the first time since at least 2015, lawmakers have introduced and in some cases passed bills that aim to ban drag. A few weeks ago, Tennessee became the first state to pass a drag ban. Politicians in Tennessee are also maintaining and pushing for less strict gun regulations. Right now, anyone over 21 doesn't need a permit to carry a handgun, and background checks aren't required to own a handgun. Whoa. Okay, so I just thought it was in general any gun, but this is still pretty bad. There have already been more than 100 mass shootings in the U.S. this year alone. Last year, gun violence became the single biggest cause of deaths in children in the U.S., and studies have shown that the states with lax gun laws suffer from more mass shootings than those with stricter rules. Now, it seems the Nashville shooting has given the anti-trans conservative wing more fodder for its cruelty, as an already hostile situation in the U.S. where trans people could become even worse. Quote, this is going to pour fuel into the fire in terms of pushing more anti-trans legislation, end quote, Caraballo said, and goes on to say, they're going to work to criminalize our existence and push us further out from the public life, end quote. Some people on the right have even framed the shooting as a holy war between Christians and trans people. This refrain and religious focus has echoed throughout the far-right ecosystem has been spread by figures with thousands of followers, and in some cases over 1 million. On Tuesday night, Fox News spread anti-trans hate and disinformation on the primetime show, often viewed by millions. The trans movement is targeting Christians, a big news banner stated on the Tucker Carlson Tonight segment. Carlson went on to claim that trans people are the natural enemy of Christians. Whoa. Others have been, like, I don't even see how, like, you could never explain how. You really couldn't. Others have been threatening explicit violence with religious undertones. In one group of far-right activists on Telegram, one poster wrote, quote, I think we've been tolerant long enough. The time for crusade has arrived, end quote. They added, let the roundups and witch hunts commence. Let the night sky be lit by burning stakes. Time to purify, end quote. Quote, transgender terrorists are the largest growing terrorist group per capita in America, end quote. And an influential far-right figure falsely wrote, to his 2 million followers on Twitter before floating the idea that the attack occurred because Easter, the holiday commemorating Jesus' resurrection, is around the corner. In reality, police have yet to state a motive, and there have been no indication that religion was tied to the shooting. Some online activists have also claimed that some trans activist groups are armed militias preparing for violence. One poster on Telegram claimed, without providing actual evidence, that, quote, there is evidence of underground and private communications amongst the transgender community of committing further acts of violence, end quote. Another extreme right figure who led a neo-Nazi group that has been designated a terrorist organization in multiple countries said he believes the shooter was part of one of these militias, end quote, jumped the gun and couldn't wait to kill some innocent white Christian kids, end quote. What the hell? They're framing it as trans person killing Christian children, Caraballo said, and goes on to say, they're particularly framing it in the way to push that kind of narrative to create conflict and lay the groundwork for someone who is unstable to act out, causing stochastic terror, yes. This will certainly result in increased threats against the LGBT community and potentially acts of violence. But even before the shooting in Nashville, the opposite was shown. Leaked emails between anti-trans lobbyists and politicians revealed how trans people were actually being targeted by Christian nationalists back in 2019. Several trans activists and LGBT groups have urged trans people to take care of themselves as vitriol continues to spread, including by stepping away from social media on spending time with friends and loved ones. Quote, the hate towards our community is going to be intense. Prepare, end quote. The Trans Resistance Network tweeted shortly after news of the shooting resurfaced. Quote, stay away from the news if you need to. Find something healthy and affirming to do. Don't listen to haters screaming on the news. This is the one moment we will keep surviving. This is one moment we will keep surviving. Oh, that's true. But you really can't expect a large amount of people to just turn off your internet. Like, that was like a stereotype of things people would say back in 2010 and further. Just get off the internet. Just don't commit suicide. Just go outside. Like, I know this person saying it in this article is saying it in much greater good faith, and I'm not trying to make it sound like it's like victim blaming. It's just not, it's like almost, to me, it's just unrealistic to even have people not be on the internet. And